Patty Simpson with Simpson Math. A frequency polygon is just another way to display quantitative data. So a frequency polygon shows the frequency or the number of data values in a category or a class or bin. So we've made a frequency display before. This is a histogram that we've created before with our professor's commute, or the number of miles the professor drives to school. I'm going to use this same data to help me create a frequency polygon. Now, a frequency polygon just takes the midpoint, that middle value of our histogram, and instead of drawing the bars, we're going to, at the midpoint, put a point there. So this is between, right in the middle of this 0 and 2. Remember, to find that midpoint, we can add the two numbers up and divide by 2 to find our midpoint. Or we can just look and see that right in the middle between 0 and 2 would be 1. So there's going to be a point on our frequency polygon at 1, 2. And I'll create the frequency polygon in a minute on that side. I just want to show you how it relates to our histogram. Then, in the middle of this bar, right in the middle of our histogram here, there were 3 professors that drove between 2 and 4 miles to work every day. Well, I'm going to show that same thing by putting a dot right in the middle of that class. So in the middle of 2 and 4 would be 3. Again, I'm going to do the same thing where I look right in the middle, so at 5, and I'm going to put a dot right in the middle of that, or a point there. Right in the middle of this bar, between 6 and 8, in between 8 and 10, and then again in between 10 and 12. Now we just take our midpoints there from each class and connect the dots. Then there's one last thing with our polygon. We're going to take and show that in the class before this, that there were no data values. No one drove less than 0 miles to work. So to show that, I'm going to go back one more of these distances. And I have to figure out what that point would be. Well, notice I'm counting by 2s. 1, 3, 5. Well, if I go backwards, 5, 3, 1. If I go back 2, I'm actually at a -1. Then I'm going to go forward another value there, another width there, to come back down to show at the end there were 0 in that category above 12 miles. So from 12 to 14 there was no one, and that midpoint is 13. So my frequency polygon just uses the midpoint of my class and then the frequency of the number in that class. So if I were actually creating a frequency polygon using this data, I would do first a vertical axis that shows the frequencies. And then I would have a horizontal axis to show the classes or bins, my categories. Here I only need to count to 4 because the highest frequency I have is 4. Just like with our frequency table, just like with our bar graph and our histogram, we need to make sure that our vertical axis starts at 0 every time. Then we can count by a consistent amount. I can count by 1s here, and that is still the number of professors. So I still need labels just like I do on my histogram, my bar graphs. Then here, I'm going to count across. I'm going to start at that lowest value of -1. This represents the class that was before 0. And there were 0 there were no data points that were below 0. Then I'm counting over. The midpoint of my first class is 1. And there are 2 data values that are in that class. So this 1 represents from 0 to 2. This 2 shows that there are 2 data values between 0 and 2. I'm going to keep counting by that consistent amount. 3 is the next midpoint in my next class. So again, this class goes from 2 to 4, and there were 2 data values in that class. Then in the next one, 5 is the midpoint, and there were, oops, this was supposed to be 3, I'm sorry, they were both supposed to be 3 because there were 3 in those. No, this was 2, that one's 3. Then in the next class is also 3. In 7, we go up to the 4, and this represents, again, that class of 6 to 8. Then out to 9, there were 3 data values in that class. 11, there are 3 data values in that class. And then we move past it, past that last class, 13, and there weren't any in there. There were none that were that big, or none that were in the class of 12 to 14. So that our frequency polygon looks like this. Now, this represents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classes. Notice we're not counting our endpoints. They weren't classes in our original data. So our original data just had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classes. You don't count those endpoints. It just kind of brings it down firmly. Then I need labels. This is the number of miles. I need a title, so professor's commute. And again, what this tells me is I look at this and I say, okay, well, how many professors went between 6 and 8 miles? Well, between 6 and 8 miles would be this class, and there were 4 professors then that went that distance. This is a frequency polygon. Math Made Simple is Simpson Math. Thanks for watching.